Ye serpents, ye offspring of vipers, how can ye escape the damnation of hell? Wherefore, behold, I send to you prophets and wise men and scribes, and some of them ye shall kill and crucify, and some of them ye shall scourge in your synagogues and persecute them from city to city, let upon you.
Hello, good morning, and welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. My name is Paul Strangini. It's a beautiful morning here in Northwest Illinois, and we are moving on to chapter 13 of Matthew, and the first of the great parables, and probably the greatest of the great parables, and one of the most important things that Jesus taught. And it's very useful. It's not a difficult to understand parable. Some parables are very difficult to understand. Some parables are, they require us to really lay down our assumptions. And I think this parable, the funny thing is, this parable is still very, I think people understand the parable, but they don't apply it to, to whatever it is they happen to, to a lot of their doctrines. They're not thinking in terms of what Jesus had to say. One second. So let's plunge right in. This is just after Jesus told the story, about the unclean spirit, which we covered in detail last time. And I say that because in the Bible there are no chapter divisions, at least not in the original text. So it's constructed as this continuum. It's not just like this collection of things. Like, Proverbs feels like that. Like it's just kind of a collection of different things. It doesn't feel sometimes it's not obvious why one verse follows the other. But in the book of Matthew, I think there's an importance to what follows what and how things play out. The same day went Jesus out of the house. And we're going to read quite a number of verses here, so strap on. Get ready, here we go. And sat by the seaside, and great multitudes were gathered together unto him, so that he went into a ship and sat, and the whole multitude stood on the shore. And he spake many things unto them in parables, saying, Behold, a sower went forth to sow. And when he sowed, some seeds fell by the wayside, and the fowls came and devoured them up. Some fell upon stony places, where they had not much earth, and forthwith they sprung up, because they had no deepness of earth. And when the sun was up, they were scorched, because they had no roots. And because they had no roots, they withered away. And some fell among thorns, and the thorns sprang up and choked them. But other fell into good ground and brought forth fruit, some 100-fold, some 60-fold, some 30-fold. Who hath ears to hear, let him hear. And he tells a little story. And you listen to that story, like, if you've studied the Bible for years like I have, like, you're not only listening to the story, you're finding new insight. And or at least it feels new, it's new all the time. I'm like, I've talked about this parable many times, and I'm just excited to talk about it again. I just love talking about these things. These little stories are so just jam-packed with wisdom and thought. It's not obvious what it means. Well, fortunately, unlike many parables, Jesus explains it for us immediately. So we're going to look at the text of the original parable, but we're going to take the explanation in right now too. So let's just take it in. Verse 10. And the disciples came and said unto him, Why speakest thou unto them in parables? Because you think about it, you get all these people in front of you, multitudes of people, and they want to hear what you have to say. And then you start telling them stories. There was the sower, and he went out to sow, and that's not the obvious course of action. It's sort of like people are going to be like, their eyes are, they're going to be like, what? Verse 11. He answered and said unto them, Because it is given unto you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it is not given. For whosoever hath, to him shall be given, and he shall have more abundance. But whosoever hath not, from him shall be taken away even that he hath. Therefore speak I to them in parables, because they seeing see not, and hearing they hear not, neither do they understand. And in them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah, which saith, By hearing ye shall hear, and shall not understand, and seeing ye shall see, and shall not perceive. I don't need to look that up. That's Isaiah chapter 6. And this is continuing that quote. For this people's heart is waxed gross, and their ears are dull of hearing, and their eyes they have closed, lest at any time they should see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and should understand with their heart, and should be converted, and I should heal them. But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. For verily I say unto you, that many prophets and righteous men have desired to see those things which ye see, and have not seen them, and to hear those things which ye hear, and have not heard them. And, we're going to cover all this in detail. It's probably going to take the rest of the week for sure to go over each, but we're going to take in the whole thing at first, because you can't just take this in pieces. We got to take it in pieces, but we're also going to take it as a whole. We're going to take it as a whole, then we're going to chop it up and break it down. We're going to talk about every single point. I don't care if it takes 2 weeks, because it's worth it. Where was I? Verse, whatever. Oh, 18. Hear ye therefore the parable of the sower. When anyone heareth the word of the kingdom, and understandeth it not, then cometh the wicked one, and catcheth away that which was sown in his heart. This is he which receiveth the seed by the wayside. But he that receiveth the seed into stony places, the same is he that heareth the word, and anon with joy receiveth it. Yet he hath not root in himself, but dureth for a while. For when tribulation or persecution ariseth because of the word, and by and by he is offended. By and by means immediately. And I like this in King James. I hope that I read it in such a way that it makes sense. So we will go over this in detail. He also that receiveth the seed among the thorns is he that heareth the word, and the care of this world and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word, and he becometh unfruitful. But he that receiveth the seed into good ground is he that heareth the word, and understandeth it, which also beareth fruit, and bringeth forth some 100fold, some 60, some 30. And then he goes on to the next parable, which is the reason why I chose that opening song. That I said I would remember last time I said I'm going to dig up that scripture from Matthew 23. And all the songs I use for my intros, you can, not all of them, sorry, but none of the heavy metal ones. Well, you can sort of find some of those on my website, but those are still in development. And the day when I get enough free time to work on it is the day it'll start to get finished. Like I said, this is not a full-time thing, ministry for me. It's like I got to work. But I have time every day to commit to it. And we should all commit you all have time for something. For the Lord. And it's not just for the Lord. It's for you. And it's like, you don't want to spend time with the Lord? I don't know how to fix that. How do you fix that? I don't know. So I found such a treasure in my wife, because here was a woman who was mostly interested in the Lord, not like in my life or me in particular, but in the Lord. If we have that between us, then we always have something so very important. Okay, back to verse 1. I don't think we need to say much about that. He goes out of the house. Well, that's the same house he was at when he was talking about his mother, his father, his sister, his brother. And he's declaring he has a greater loyalty he owes to those who adhere to the word of God. These are my family. This is my mother. This is my father. This is my sister. This is my brother. He wouldn't say his father, because God was his father. My mother, my sister, my brother. And they were out there. They wanted to pull him out and say, we want to talk to you for whatever reason. And he gave more honor to his disciples. And I feel the same way. It's like my family is a very tight-knit group. That doesn't mean I don't have affection for my extended family, but my real family is made up of people who are not just bound to me by blood. You think about that right there. He had stated the importance of spiritual family as opposed to flesh and blood family. Well, he wasn't saying his family, flesh and blood family, was somehow, well, I'm not even related to them. No, he was born of Mary. Anyways, I want to remember that when we get to the parable of the tares, because I have something to say about that, and that's where I stopped reading. But that's not going to be for at least a week, I think. Probably starting that next Monday. Okay. Great multitudes were gathered to him, so that he went into a ship, and they stood on the shore. Again, that's if you guys talk to a lot of people. And I run into this a lot when we're doing wrestling and stuff. It's like, back up, kids. If you all back up, you can all see and all hear. But if you crowd around the speaker, you can't hear them. They need space. Oh, I got to take this off my eyes. I wear my glasses too often. I'm just making my nose sore. So, all right, then he speaks to them in a parable. The sower goes forth to sow. And when he sowed, some seeds fell by the wayside, and the fowls came and devoured them up. All right, that's the first line. What Jesus had to say about that was this. He had so much to say in the meantime. And remember, all that stuff he said in the middle is important too. They seeing, see not, hearing, hear not. The point of this is to speak directly to those whom God has given to hear. When anyone heareth the word of the kingdom, they hear the gospel comes, and then they're just like, they don't understand. It's like it doesn't not enter into their heart. And Jesus says, then comes the wicked one and catcheth away that which is sown in their heart. This is he which receiveth the seed by the wayside. And this is a lot like the parable he told in the last chapter about the unclean spirit. Like it's almost the reverse, the inverse is the proper way to characterize it. you know, you can tell people the truth, and it never enters into their heart. But instead, you know, like you can defeat an idea, like so where the idea is just sort of banished for a moment. But because the truth does not enter into their hearts, it doesn't penetrate really. The bad idea goes and finds 7 other bad ideas. And those all come and return to the home, finding that the new idea hasn't taken hold at all. And the last day of that man is worse. Meaning, you know, like as Jesus was going persuading people, he was also causing them to be hardened against him and making their state worse and worse. There's a scripture in I believe it's in Proverbs, but it could be maybe Ecclesiastes, I don't know. Be not often at your neighbor's house, lest he hate you. You know? You can make a nuisance of yourself. And with the scriptures, you can do the same thing. You can be telling things that are all true, but the way in which you're trying to get at them is just going to harden them against you. The idea of a path. The seed sown on the wayside. He draws this picture of a seed. The wayside is literally on a path. So in the imagery of the parable, we have a guy who is sowing seeds by the method of broadcast sowing, meaning he's just kind of throwing them out. He's not like when I plant my garden, I very carefully plant each plant. I mean, I get the little peat pot and I put a couple seeds in there, and then when they sprout, I pluck out the extra ones, or I go to Menards or whatever. I don't want to give a brand name and advertisement. My thing. I go to the lawn and garden center, and I pick up those little trays of plants, so that they're already started, and plant them individually, very carefully. Unless you're very on the ball and planting very early. In the climate I live in, you will not get a very good garden. You have to plant early. I plant May 1st, and if I get a frost, I plant again. That's just what you have to do. Because if you don't, you won't get your tomatoes until August, So he's depicting broadcast sowing. And, the seeds are he's not taking concern about where the seeds land. He knows that he's standing on good ground, and that's where he intends for the seed to go. But some's gonna, as he's doing this, as he's covering the good ground, the seed's gonna land in other places too. And one place is the path. And the path, it symbolizes the well-trodden way. Meaning the ground has already been pressed down, so that it's not turned up earth that is ready to receive. It reminds me of the hardened wineskins, when he talked about the wineskins. They can't change. They're immutable. So some seeds just bounce right off the surface of the ground, and they can't take root. They just sit exposed. If you're walking on tilled up earth that's soft, soil that's ready for planting, the seeds all get nestled into the ground, to the earth, and they have a high probability. Sorry, I didn't get enough sleep last night. Still in a great mood, but not enough sleep. So the seeds have a high probability of sprouting because they're in the midst of this good ground. But on the path, you sow them on, I don't want to say a sidewalk. It is still earth. It's not like this adamant concrete, but it's untilled, trodden down ground. If we want to receive the word, our minds have to be sort of turned over. They have to be tilled up. The ways of thinking we've adhered to, the trodden path, the path we've trodden, has to be ripped up first. As long as we are in that state, we cannot receive God's word, because because that's the nature of that. Human minds that have solidified into a particular way of thinking, we can't receive it. We're not open to it. We have this hard, planar surface. And so, since our minds do not receive it, the devil comes and steals it away. And I often said that to me, in many ways, when it talks about the fowls of the air here, that is symbolic of people like the Pharisees, or pastors, or priests, or any other sort of bird who comes along. Because I think in a lot of the parables, birds are often the vultures that come and feed on carrion, or or like in the Sermon on the Mount, they don't make their living by labor. Behold the fowls of the air, they sow not, neither do they reap, nor gather into barns. We even call some religious leaders, well, actually I think we named the bird after them, the cardinal. The bird probably came second, okay? But they don't sow, they don't reap, they don't build, they don't gather into barns, but they're taken care of, for good or for evil. There are some men who do not labor as other men labor. There's some, and it's not, I don't sow or reap. I mean, I do in my way. But sometimes I sort of sow to the future by maybe doing favors for people, being willing to go out of my way and work, to go the extra mile, to do extra things, to hopefully win goodwill, and hopefully that will abound to rewards in the future. So I do that, but my labor is not, I sit here at this desk and I work on the artistic endeavors that I get paid to do. And that's just the form of labor I do. But we can be an all talk person where just all we do is talk. And like I said, maybe maybe I'm taking that too far. But sometimes I feel like we can become like a bird when we just fly in and snatch away that which was sown. Like we've got, and I see, Satan uses people to get to people. And so, like I said, people don't have ideas, ideas have people. And so you can have someone, the truth gets sown in their heart, and someone comes along and says, no, that's not how it is. Because I have the well-worn way of men that I believe is true. And it's well-worn, so it doesn't need to grow. It doesn't need to be, germinate and go through the process of change. It's already established. Like establishment religions, you can just say well, that's not according to what we've established. That's not according to the Orthodox, small o Orthodox way of thinking. And this is not just in religion. I mean, you look at almost any field. You try to change things. Like people get used to doing something one way for a long time, and then that's how we do it. And trying to come in with a new idea, a great idea, and overthrowing that order is not easy. Even no matter how good the idea is, people are going to be they will be resistant to change, to something new, to something better. And that's the nature of man. We resist those changes because we, no man, as Jesus said in another place, not here, no man having tasted old wine desires new, because he says the old is better. And how you quantify that, good versus bad wine. If you've ever tasted wine, I mean, sometimes you taste something and it's awful, but people say it's a delicacy. It's And sometimes I think it's like what they have in mind is they've learned to value difference, something unusual. Let's subscribe to Line by Line Bible Studies. I will suggest that. Click on the like button. So I don't feel unliked. For more studies, songs, and more, like I said, any of my acoustic songs you hear, you can definitely find at oraclesofgod.org. Or most any. They're all supposed to be there. And we'll get that site updated eventually. Sorry, I just had a yawn. Katie hates that. She likes to see me well rested. Send your questions to questions@oraclesofgod.org. And or you can put them right in the chat. You know, right on the right hand side there, I think there's a little chat bubble in the live stream. I see right now we have no questions, and that is fine. Though I love questions. Mostly when I say, oh good, there's no questions, I hate to think that they've been sitting up there for 20 minutes or something and I didn't address them immediately. I do like questions. Because otherwise I have to think of the questions. You know, if you think of the questions for me, then I don't have to think about the question. It's just about the answer. And sometimes that's easier. You know, I mean, it's easier to answer a question than to come up with the right question to tell people what they need to know and what they're thinking. It's not easy. Okay. And I gotta go back to where we were. Some seeds fell by the wayside, and the fowls came and devoured them up. And, you know, Jesus says the devil comes and steals it out of their heart. The devil needs to steal by some agent. So there's got to be some agency. He doesn't just quietly come, though that can happen. He's just saying for all those things that it's the devil's work to have them impenetrable to the word. The word does not enter into their minds. It is so, it is just completely blocked from getting in. Because the soil, he doesn't say what everything represents. And I'm saying definitely the birds can represent clergy or just the agents of the establishment that come and prevent anything from changing. Because certainly if the birds don't come and the rains come instead, that seed can kind of make its way in. And that's why paths that are not well trodden will quickly become trodden, grown over with grass. So without a conspiracy of men and fowls, the path can be converted, but because it takes effort to preserve it. Nevertheless, in the moment, it is a very difficult situation to deal with. The soil in every case represents men's hearts and minds. Because, again, the seed did not enter, the seed did not go through, and so they don't understand what they're hearing. They don't even recognize it for what it is. It's not just a question of, they may understand it outwardly. Like, they may understand the words, they may understand what he's saying, but they don't understand it like the way we might understand it, as being like, this is critical information. They don't value it. They just let it come and be taken away. It doesn't enter into their heart as an important thing. It doesn't become fruitful in them. It has to enter in, germinate, and grow into something and bear fruit. And he said that already with the good soil. Verse 5 says, some fell upon stony places, where they had not much earth. Not much earth. So, what does that represent? They give it not much thought. it's sort of, it does, they don't really understand it. They kind of understand it. Like, they may understand, like, oh, I can be saved. Oh, I want to live forever. I want to go to heaven. So yes, I'll receive it. Jesus says in his explanation that they it's they that hear the word, and anon, which means immediately, they receive it with joy. Oh, wow. I love Jesus. Whatever, I was going to... they just get all, I'm so happy to receive the word of the kingdom. Oh, how wonderful. Yet he hath not written himself. He continues with that, using the symbology. He has not wrote in himself. Oh, so sorry. I feel so tired. Ugh. Oh boy, this will all come to an end real soon. He hath not written himself, but dureth for a while. For when tribulation or persecution ariseth because of the word, by and by, that phrase, it sounds like, no, it means when those things happen, he immediately is offended. By and by. It's like, does not mean the way it feels in modern English. So these are that it doesn't really get into their heads. They, it's like a lot of things I talk about in the New Testament. They don't prepare. They don't take it seriously. They don't follow after Jesus. They just sort of receive the idea. That's not enough. A declaration of faith and a sort of like, wow, I guess I believe in this, is not sufficient. You will fall away. It is not the equivalent of salvation because it does not represent true faith. It represents just a feeling of attraction to the idea and maybe a willingness to outwardly commit. But it is not an outward commitment, or a statement of commitment does not take the place of a real commitment. And those who are not really committed to Christ will not find themselves bearing fruit to Christ and will not find themselves welcomed into God's kingdom. It's not just Team Jesus. We are required of some necessity to perform something, to care, and to do service to others, whatever the fruit is. It's not necessarily you come out here. I remember when I was in Arnold Murray's teachings, I thought fruit was automatically more word. More of the same. The sower sows the word. That's what he said. The word of the kingdom. One of Jesus' criticisms of the Pharisees, they say and do not. Like I said, and he said, by your words you will be condemned, by your words you will be justified. But actions speak louder than words. And actions are the result of words. And out of the heart proceeds these things. The things you think and the truth of what you have to say. Not just the outward words. Because there are many examples in the scripture where it says, that they speak with great swelling words. They praise me with their lips, but their hearts are far removed from me. When it talks about the words, we're talking about the true word. Not just the blah, blah, blah that comes out of their mouths. Not just the lies that men speak, but the truth about you, about how committed you truly are to Christ. And so, a lot of people are not good at speaking, but they're good at doing. Helping others, being charitable, all those things are part of the fruit of God's word being in you. And things like the fruit of the Spirit also count. Love, joy, peace, long-suffering, etc. I always get to the third one. I'm like, I don't remember. Goodness, kindness, gentleness, godliness, righteousness. There's all kinds of fruit of the Spirit. So, we don't want to be shallow Christians. That's what it is. It's a shallow Christianity. It's nominal Christianity. And it's, you know, like I said, it's like, it's not just, it is good to be a Christian. At least we all, you know, nominally means, nomos means name, I believe. What does it mean, law? In Greek, I think it may come from, I think it may mean actually law. So let me just, I'm trying to dig my mind for that long ago researched idea. Autonomic. Yes, the self-laud. It does mean law. But we also use it in terms of name, like the idea of denominative. One thing, or the word noun. It's all along the same lines, I believe. I'm not a linguist, but I mean, I'm very interested in English speech, how we talk. So, I don't think that's a relevant point, though. I'm just getting caught up on it. The things we believe in need to take a deep root in us so that they can come out and bring forth fruit. That's important. It's required of us. It's not supposed to be like a big labor. You know, it's a natural outcome. You know what I mean? We mostly need to prepare our hearts to receive the truth. And then the truth in us has its own action. It grows and bears fruit. This is the group that is the most heartbreaking because it's like they seem to receive it. They receive it with joy. It reminds me of the guy who, you know, he comes to the wedding, but he has not on a wedding garment. That's chapter 22. That's coming up. He got all the way to the wedding. Sorry, I just got to take this off. Sorry, Katie. He got all the way to the wedding, but he lost his place because he had not a wedding garment. We haven't covered that yet, but I talk about it all the time. And I you know, it's hard to teach the scriptures without bringing in. It's hard to teach it from scratch. Yeah, I don't know how to do that sort of Sunday school teaching. I consider always my study to be sort of an advanced study. It's good if you have a general overall knowledge of the scriptures when you study with me. Let's talk about the next one, because we're going to get to come back to that idea, because we're going to hit that verse again. I mean, it's simple to understand. Shallow Christianity, well, here's what I want to say. Because people will act as if shallow Christianity equals salvation. And it can't. It doesn't. According to Jesus, it does not equal salvation. You know, people who take that legalistic approach and say, like Romans 10:9 says, if you believe on Jesus and you confess his name, you will be saved. And I say, well, as long as you don't turn your back on it, as long as you don't later on decide, nah. Because people who turn their backs on the Lord, he will turn their back on them. Peter turned his back on him, but only for a moment. And he regretted it instantly. Because you can dice things up and look at it like this and say, like, well, you know, when you sinned the other day, if you really believed in God, you wouldn't have done that. Why do you turn your back on the Lord? You know, I could get really sharp with you and put that standard against you. You know, and you know, and it's very easy to do to people. Like, I'm a sinful person, and you know, I'm not as sinful as I used to be. Thank God. But like in the past, you know, you could look at, I was enthusiastic about the Lord from the time of I was like 19. I've been very serious about it, but I also had very serious problems with me. I used to use marijuana, you know. I was, you know, I had other, I'll just say, sexual lusts, you know. And they could say, you know, if you believe in the Lord, how could you ever do that? How could you ever do anything that, you know, if you believe in the Lord, how could you lie? Don't you know that God's watching? He doesn't make himself immediate so that you can feel his presence. Because, you know, if he was hovering over you at all times and ready to strike you down, you probably would behave. It's like my wife says about, you know, this is true of, you know, while dad's around, the kids just behave just a bit better. You know, my kids aren't bad kids when I'm not around. They're not. But they're a little more free with their, you know, they take their liberty closer to the edge of the acceptable when dad's not around. Whereas when dad's around, they're just so well and magically well behaved. It's astonishing. The older ones will completely, it's like, you know, they're different when you're around. I think it's kind of funny. I'm like, because it's like, I don't know what to do about that. Well, I do know it. It's something they got to do. They have to learn what kind of people they want to be. And you have to learn that too. God is not hovering over you, punishing you at every instant. So you got to figure out, well, what kind of person do I want to be? What kind of life do I want to lead? And so what I'm saying is, what am I saying? Well, you know, you could put a very harsh standard on anyone about belief, about, do you really believe in God? Well, if you really, you know, if you believe on me, why do you not do what I say? That's something Jesus said. I'm trying to remember the exact wording. How do you say that you... Is that from Jesus specifically? You say you believe in me, but you don't do the things that I say you ought to do. How can this be? It is. It ought not to be. But I see numerous examples of the apostles. It's because... How? Because I have not grown up into the man I need to be. My seed is in me, but it has not yet brought forth fruit. It is growing. It is not brought... It's brought forth some fruit, obviously, but it's like there's more fruit to bring forth. We want, you know, let's be hundredfold. Some 30, some 60, 100-fold. Not every plant is of the same fruitfulness. It's kind of amazing. You know, I plant a bunch of seemingly identical plants, and they don't all bring forth the same amount of fruit. There's not some predictable... It's not like I'm planting genetically modified corn where it's like, yeah, you can predict, you know, just almost, not exactly. No, even then, you can never predict down to the kernel, how many kernels of corn they're going to be. When the sun was up, they were scorched because they had no root. They withered away. Without that deeper commitment, we will be vulnerable to any sort. It's tribulation or persecution for the word's sake. You know, it can even be people mocking. You know, like they believe, and then people start mocking the word, and they sheepishly go away. Or if someone comes along, well, that's more the path. You know, like someone comes along and brings objections of science. The birds can be. They don't have to be. You know. Often I've thought about it because of my background in terms of, you know, false doctrine within the house of God. Like the birds come along and snatch it away. Because Jesus was dealing with that. The Pharisees of his time were the establishment authorities. And so, you know, those would be the form that the birds took. But it could also be in the form of the oppositions of science. That's the path sometimes for people. As it comes in and the word can't penetrate because of like, well, you know, the Bible says this, but we know this to be true. And the truth of it cannot penetrate. Like I said in that study I did, you know, things don't have to be literally true to be absolutely true. Like the parable of the sower, there didn't have to be an actual guy who went out and did this. Though, you know, I used to say, and I think, well, of course this happened. But Jesus isn't referring to an historical event. And he's referring to an imaginary event that, of course, could have happened millions of times. But it's like if I wrote a story about a fictional character doing things that everyday people do. Well, of course it's happened for real. He's describing a real life situation. But the story itself isn't like he's like he had to have some reference that he was referencing. Well, yeah, it was John of I'm trying to think. John of Bethlehem, actually, a guy I knew in my youth, and this is what happened. He was sowing seed, and I noticed some fell on the wayside, some fell among thorns, some fell on stony ground. And so, the stones, what does that represent? It's things that prevent the word from taking root in our heart. We've got some sort of stones down. There's like a hardness at the depth of us. It's not on the surface. The path represents a sort of surface hardness. And the stones represent like a deep hardness. A hardness of heart that's under the surface. And I see that in that, like, people who kind of take this form, they are outwardly Christian. They will receive the faith, but they won't do much about it. You know what I mean? Because deep down, while they want to be saved, they don't want to serve God. Deep down, while they want to have the benefits of Christianity, they do not want to pick up the burdens of Christianity. And so as soon as a burden comes along, like tribulation or persecution or even just mockery, they will abandon their faith. It's not based on, there's not, the reasons are entirely internal. It has to do with their disloyalty and inability, and they have not truly, they've latched onto the good parts. They found it. They're like, oh, with joy I receive this. But there are hard things in their hearts that prevent it from going any further than an outward commitment, than a very shallow commitment. So immediately, but the thing is, it's like people who say once saved, always saved. These people with joy receive the word, and it goes on. It's not just like, well, that was dispensationally before the gospel of Paul and blah 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 blah. Drawing those lines, these things apply all the time. This is true of, it's not, God isn't changing the rules as far as that goes, because there are plenty of fake Christians, and that's what this is ultimately talking about. I don't think that producing, like he said, of the good soil, remember he said some 30, some 60, some hundredfold. Like, not everyone produces 100-fold fruit. Not everyone has a website with Bible studies and songs and whatever it is I do. And not everyone's going to be like me. And there are people who are much more fruitful than I am. I mean, people going on missionary trips around the world to spread the gospel to people that have never heard it. I'm just in the back room sort of trying to help out people who are believers, to edify them and to arm them and stuff. It's like, I'm not doing that kind of, there's more fruitful things, but there's all kinds of fruit that we can bear. And not everyone's going to have the same amount or even the same kind. The word comes in many, the word grows in us in a variety of ways. There are differing gifts, right? There are differing gifts of the Spirit. All one Spirit, but many gifts. Again, as I'm looking, I'm like, gosh, I could go on, sure. Fortunately, I'll get a chance to talk about it again, because we will go through every verse. It's worth going through twice, especially on a day. Give it a day. Hopefully get a good night's sleep tonight. I think I will. Probably the problem is I'm also hosting a guest at this time, so it's like that's taking away from my time during the day, and trying to make every day, fill in all the blanks of the day and fit it's going to be quite challenging. I skipped a verse. Some fell among thorns, and the thorns sprung up and choked them. The sun represents the heat of persecution. When the heat, like to say the heat is on. The heat is on. I don't think that song at all encapsulates what the idea of heat being on. The heat is on. Things are getting scorched. This little bit of faith you have, is it going to endure? It only takes a little faith. That's the beauty of it. A little real faith. Receiving something with joy outwardly and be like, oh yes. A little faith is not like show a little faith at one time. It's like you got to keep believing. It can't wither away. It can't die. I mean, it can die, but if it does die, then it's dead. It's not real. Our faith must be a living faith. He that receiveth the seed among the thorns is he that heareth the word, and the care of this world, the deceitfulness of riches, choke the word, and it becometh unfruitful. And I reserve the right to go back over those verses. So again, here we go. The thorns are representative of the care of this life. The deceitfulness of riches. This is we have the surface hardness, the underground hardness, and then there's the external hardness of the world at large. I would call it that, external hardness. But it's a thorny thing. The world, there are other things that grow up in the ground. I mean, the word isn't the only thing that can take root in our mind. Our minds can be hardened against the word. It can be filled with stones underneath, or there can be other stuff already planted, already growing. Weeds. And if the seed falls among those things, the thorns can spring up, they grow faster, and they choke it out. So, it's a very apt analogy. You have a garden, you throw a seed in. If you don't weed the garden, if you just allow the weeds to grow up, it will stunt the growth of your plant. A lot of fruitful plants grow slower and are more tender than weeds. That's just how it is. Weeds are often very hardy. Cultivated plants have been cultivated by man for thousands of years, and they are often require man to look after them. That's how they've been developed. That's how they've evolved. And don't, that word evolve, I know that for some people it's an evil word, but it changes over time. Like, we take a lot of the wild things and we cultivate them and crossbreed them and modify them, and they become less hardy but more tasty. But in the process, those things also become dependent on our care and looking after them. Look at Eden. God planted in it the things for man to take care of. The garden required his care. And as we, and when we develop crops, they become even more dependent on us. Okay, whatever. But that's how it is. So some seed fell among thorns, the cares of this life, the deceitfulness of riches. And that, that is another form of nominal Christianity in a way. That's more of the true image of nominality. They're just, sorry. Sorry about the yawniness, Katie. Let's check before we get to the close here. Nothing in the chat. Good. The thorns, there are so many things in life to distract us. I got work, and it was this summer, my work started really interfering with my ability to do my weekly Bible study, so I had to find a way. I don't have time to sit down and edit these things. I'm like, so I got to just get up early and do one every day. And in a sense, that conquered the problem and multiplied my productivity. Even though, like, I might sit here yawning and these studies are not as well put together, and it's all, you know, it is what it is. It's just like, we're not editing out boring parts about Paul humming and hawing about some idea or being like, what was I saying? Because I literally, that used to happen in my studies. I'd sit there and I'd sit for 10 minutes trying to reconstruct an idea. And then I'd just edit. It wasn't 10 minutes, but like maybe a whole solid minute just thinking about, what did I just forget that I was talking about, and just sit there and think. Or go back and listen to it and then go, oh yeah, I want to say more about that. And you can hear it in the studies. You can tell they're edited together. But, you know, I sacrificed that sort of density of thought for, you know, a greater productivity of overall, you know, having more to offer. And that's this boring topic. Why am I talking about it? Oh, well, my point was that because, you know, the cares of this life, I got to look after my family. I got to earn money to support them. Because that's what God has called me to do, to be a family man and to support my family and to see to it my sons and my daughter get a good start in life. You know, they get the education they need to excel in the field of their choice, whatever that happens to be. A lot of them are into the same kind of thing I am. You know, they're mercenary artists, I'll call it that. And you know, meaning mercenary. You know, it's like some people are artists and they are like the work I do in Oracles of God. It's love, you know. But sometimes if you know, people want to get in the field of art, you have to be willing to be a mercenary. You don't get to just draw your pictures and people pay you money for it, or sing your song. You got to make their song for them, for their product, or for whatever. So the cares of this life can interfere with our ability to serve God. Not just that, and that's not so bad. You know, like working to survive. You can serve the Lord in your work, in your daily life, by being a good example, by just doing the right thing, being charitable with people, being charitable with charity, you know, whatever, just doing the good things that Christ has called us to do, the righteousness, the holiness, the performing all the things that he has called us to. When we do that, we're being fruitful. But to be unfruitful is to allow the cares of this life to stop us from performing the good things. Not just doing, you know, like my Bible study. I use that. That's a big thing I do. I do a daily Bible study. That's how many people do every day. You know, it is a big deal. For, you know, it's a commitment. You know what I'm saying? It's not something you just do. But there are lots of smaller things we do. If I were to stop loving my wife, if I were to stop, you know, taking care of my children because of the cares of this life, and the thought that if I could have riches, I'd be happy. Keep shaking my camera. You know, riches are what will satisfy me. If I could only have this, if I only have that, then then I leave off doing the good things that Christ has called me to in the faith. Because when the faith is not just I believe in Jesus, I'm going to teach the Bible. That's so the wrong idea, because not all have the same gifts. It is following him in all of our actions, you know, being committed to him internally. That's why it is the seed goes into the ground, which is your mind, and it brings forth all kinds of fruit. And just the love you feel towards other people and the way you express it is so much a form of that fruit. It is not to be ignored or discounted or devalued. I always try to be careful that people would understand that, like, do not think of serving Christ as just having a ministry We all have our own ministry and service to do. We serve him by serving others in a variety of capacities, by being a good friend, by being a good person, in as much as it is possible as a man to be good, to emulate Christ in our daily walk, to adhere to the righteous standards which he has set out, which the New Testament outlays, and also which the Spirit demands of us in every interaction, which isn't even covered in the Scriptures. Because life is so filled with situations and moments that you can't just codify it all. If the world could not contain all the books that could be written about Jesus, I'm telling you, they could not contain the laws that would govern how we behave in each and every situation, because the world is full of possibilities and infinite situations which we have no direct answer of how to behave. So we look to the Spirit to guide us, and you are bringing forth the fruit when you, through the Spirit, in each and every little situation that you find yourself engaged in, are doing what Christ would have you do. That is, when you continue in following after those things, when you're keeping faith with Christ and being guided by his Spirit, that is the essence of what it means to be fruitful. You're not letting that word die, but it is coming forth in every area of your life, not just, like I said, like a ministry. I don't want you to think shallowly or just think of that 50th piece of fruit. Just bring forth the first ones, the primary ones first things first. Bring forth 30fold, then 60, then 100. Not everyone's gonna have the same output, because not all have the same gifts. Covet greater gifts. God can teach us all. He can expand us and make us grow, and we can become more fruitful. As Jesus said, to him shall be given, to him the hath shall be given, and from him the hath not shall be, even that thing which he has will be taken away. The seed that is sown among thorns is choked, and the seed that is entered into the heart of the one who receives it with joy, but then is stony underneath, they lose that. And the one on the path, the birds come. The things we get, the things we receive, we lose them if we are not careful after them. If we don't value them, if we are not truly love them, and how we receive it, it's so important. Anyways, we're going to continue talking about this chapter. We got through the first part. We'll start with the good ground next time. We've been talking about it all along. I don't know. We'll probably just keep going. We'll start with verse 9, I think, because we've covered. They fell on good ground, and I've been talking about this bringing forth fruit 160, 30fold. We've talked about it. So we're going to start with verse 9, and that doesn't mean we won't refer back. We're going to start there next time. So thanks for joining me together. What am I talking about? Thanks for joining me today. I look forward to studying with you next time, tomorrow. I think that's my whole little that's all I have to say, my spiel about that. That's the wrong card, Paul. Just one more reminder. Subscribe, yes, and for more study songs and more. I think I meant writing by that. And also I have another YouTube channel you might check out, you might subscribe to. That's primarily a vehicle for my song. I'm not terribly active on it as far as, but the activity may be spread out, but it doesn't stop. I didn't want to flood that channel with these things because it would drown out all the music videos. It did feel worthy of a separate channel. Funny thing is, I haven't even announced on that channel that this channel exists. That's how, I'm busy just doing content. It's like people can catch up. So thanks for joining me, etc., etc. And let's have a song to go out with. Let's go out the same way we came in.
Ye serpents, ye offspring of vipers, how can ye escape the damnation of hell? Wherefore, behold, I send to you prophets and wise men and scribes, and some of them ye shall kill and crucify, and some of them ye shall scourge in your synagogues and persecute them from city to city, let upon